Although he could probably talk Phillies for the whole segment. He probably doesn't even want to talk NFL at this point. And Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press covers the NFL, joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. Rob, how you doing today?
100% would love to talk Phillies. Can't wait for some more baseball action. It's the best time of year, Josh. This is great. Opening day weekend. I love it. Some baseball will be on our TVs for the next 7 months. It's awesome. But I'm getting ready to head out to Phoenix for the NFL league meetings. NFL never takes a minute off, as you know.
Yeah, I laughed with I think it was I saw on X. You said that your wife just realized that baseball season started the other day when you had all the TVs going with all the baseball games on.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and nothing like the baseball package, and it's great to have. It's got to be on somewhere in the background. It never dominates. She doesn't allow me to have it on the dominant unless I'm in my office and I'm by myself. But it's got to be somewhere. You got to have somewhere in the house.
Well, speaking of the Phillies, I'll ask you really quick before we get to the football stuff, because we were talking about before you came on. To me, I was telling everybody that they need to be ready for a roller coaster year because the Phillies are so desperate to sell us on this bill of goods that, see, we made adjustments to the roster. See, we're different. But yet opening day was what we all would have expected, right? Christopher Sanchez does his job. Kyle Schwarber does his job. Phillies acquire a bullpen guy. He implodes. Bryce Harper, he has a rough day at the office. Like, this is what it's going to be for 161 days again, Rob. There's going to be highs. There's going to be lows. It doesn't matter about the 162, Rob. It matters what you do in October. The problem with the Phillies is, it made everybody frustrated. It's not that we hate the team. This is what the Dombrowski and the higher-ups of the Phillies don't understand. It's the fact that we've seen this script before. We've seen this television narrative before, right? We've seen this movie before. We know you can win 90-some games in the regular season. It matters what you do when the calendar flips to October, Rob.
100%. It's all about Red October. And honestly, it's hard to be at that stage of success where anything less than a championship, a parade, is considered a great year, a successful season. But that's where they are. Getting to the playoffs just don't matter anymore. You have to get to the playoffs. You have to get into the dance, so you have to get there. So these next 6 months matter from that standpoint. You don't want to jump out to an 8-22 start. So you want to, and there's competitive teams in the East and there's competitive teams in the National League. So you want to position yourself to where you can. But even last year, they have home field advantage, right? Didn't they have home field advantage in that series? I can't.
Yes,
even
they
remember.
did. Yes, they
Against
did.
the Dodgers, and still end up couldn't bring it back home, couldn't win that game. And it's going to ultimately come down to that. You know, you see Alec Boehm a couple of years ago was an all-star, and then there's the constant speculation about moving on from Alec. They didn't bring in Alex Bregman. They didn't bring in anybody else. He hits a 3-run homer on opening day. That's huge. Unfortunate situation, man, with what he's dealing with, like, and his parents and that lawsuit. And I know that's happened to other players.
Ryan Howard.
And Baker Mayfield too as well.
Mm-hmm.
You wonder how that can impact a guy over the course of the season. And we know that Alec is an emotional type player, right? You've seen him fire his helmet or throw his bat when things don't go his way, and it's just human nature. You have something like that, so I hope it doesn't have a negative impact on him. But they've got to win their 90-plus games to get to October, and honestly, I feel like it's about who they get in July or before the trade deadline, because I'm not convinced that this team can win it all when we've seen the failures over the past few seasons. So maybe Dallas Garcia can be a big bat in the playoffs, but there's a long way to go, man. And that's the exciting part is it's a long way to go. It's a grind. It's a daily, constant conversation piece. And what's Bryce Harper going to end up with? How's he going to play? Is he going to be elite this season? Is he not going to be elite this season? As long as he's elite in October and they have a parade, that's all that matters. I don't care if he hits 232 right now and with 22 homers, you know. But I think Bryce is, and I got to see a little bit of him in spring training. I think he's going to. It's a prove-it year for him in a lot of ways, just from the whole off season and what he's knowing him and his mentality and what he wants to do, I think he'll rebound nicely. It's not like he had a bad year either last year. It's not like you're rebound. He was injured. He was hurt. He missed a lot of the season. But I think he'll bounce back with an MVP type season.
Well, Rob, let's flip it to for the Phillies to the Eagles, because the offseason, you just mentioned it. It's been very interesting for the Eagles because, while a lot of teams made those big splash moves early on, it feels like the Eagles are kind of working around the margins a little bit. And I think probably the sneakiest move that was made this past week was actually the re-signing of Fred Johnson, because of the fact that this is a team that needs all the depth they can get their hands on. Brett Toth, he left in free agency. You're bringing in a new O-line coach. This team, no matter what happens with the A.J. Brown thing, they need as many bodies going into camp who actually know what they're doing. I don't want to see a team, Rob, that goes in the camp with too many young guys who don't know the way of the NFL, shall we call it. I think that was part of the problem last year. They had too many guys who didn't know NFL ball, and I think it held them back and it forced them to play people like a Matt Pryor almost getting his quarterback killed in week 3 against the Rams, or forcing you to play more Keely Ringo than you wanted to, because the young guys you drafted weren't ready to step in and do a job. So I think it's important to have guys like the Fred Johnsons of the world, Rob, to go in there and be like, hey, we know you can do a job. We need you in case.
Yeah, I like Fred Johnson as a depth player, and he's somebody who stepped in, and he played well at times last year, and then they went from a Johnson to a Johnson when he replaced Lane.
Right.
I still think they're going to end up getting I've done 2 mocks. I've switched up my first 1.0 and 2.0 probably 80%, but for the Eagles, I kept both at 23. The offensive tackle from Utah, Caleb Lomu, is a guy who is going to potentially be a success to Lane Johnson. I really think they still go that route. They get an offensive lineman in the first round, somebody who can step in and play right away, but doesn't necessarily have to with Lane and Jordan Mailata as long as they're healthy. So you can have that luxury of grooming a guy at tackle, or maybe he can play inside and then move outside when needed. And you need it to be somebody of a high quality, high caliber potential, long-term foundation anchor piece. So that's why I really do think they'll go that route in the first round. Of course, they can move up and down, and that's what Howie does. They've stockpiled a lot of picks, but they need guys who can contribute, who can understand, who can play, because this is a team that's expected to be, again, a Super Bowl contender, and no reason for me to think they shouldn't be. I haven't checked the Vegas odds, but I know they're pretty high up there, right? And you don't want to be in a position where you've got to count on, like you said, from last year, and you're counting on guys who are not as familiar, not as, and maybe in some situations just not ready for the moment. It's also a big year on the offensive line because of the transition without Jeff Stoutland and his impact on Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey and Landon Dickerson and everybody who he has helped elevate to, in some cases, Hall of Fame status, and in some cases just made them Pro Bowlers. And it's all eyes are going to be on what's the Eagles' offensive line look like this year without Stout. And you know that there'll be criticism the first time somebody messes up in OTAs or wherever it may be, because I don't know that I've seen any team where stats are a daily thing in training camp or in the off-season workouts like they are with the Eagles.
Rob, I'm going to go back to the A.J. Brown thing. Just kind of seems like we're never going to get out of this loop. But the Eagles bring in a guy in Elijah Moore, big ties to A.J. Brown, very close friend of his. How much of that really is the Eagles are saying we just needed another receiver on the roster, or was it more of a, AJ, we're going to try and help you out here. We want you around. We're going to bring in a guy you know. Where does that lie in that whole situation?
I don't think it hurts to have a guy that it has a relationship with him in the room. I don't think Elijah Moore wasn't brought in to replace A.J. Brown. If they move on from A.J. Brown, they've got to find a different way to fill that void. and they're in a position where they don't have to trade AJ. They never did have to trade AJ unless he made it extremely uncomfortable and demanded out. He hasn't done it that way publicly. Privately, we know that the Eagles realize and understand that AJ would have preferred to move on somewhere. Their asking price was high. And when you see what Jalen Waddle brings back in a return, I didn't think the Eagles were going to be able to get what they wanted for AJ, and they certainly didn't. But then once you see Jalen Waddle go for what his cost was, you feel like Howie's justified in asking. Like, I know Jalen Waddle is a great player. I'm taking AJ Brown over Jalen Waddle just because of the fact that he's bigger, stronger, that type of possession guy, has won a Super Bowl. He's been through it. He's been to another Super Bowl. So it's a guy who doesn't shrink in the big moment. Not saying Jalen Waddle does or would. And Jalen's got all the off-field type character traits that you love in a player in Jalen Waddle. I don't know how much that factored into his price, his price tag, but like, he's a great dude. He'll never be a problem. We'll trade a 1 and 2 and swap and do all that for him. But I think the Eagles could still hold out and be like, hey, we're not going to move AJ Brown unless we get our price. And maybe closer to the draft as we get, and there's some conversations in Phoenix this week when everybody gets together, and as we get closer to the draft, will the Patriots move that? What are they, 31, right? Will the Patriots move 31 for AJ? I would have to think that the Eagles would do that, but I think they want more, certainly than a 31. They probably will want something else, a 1 and a 4, a 1 and whatever. I never thought they'd be able to get a 1, but now I don't fault them for holding out for a 1, especially after the most recent moves.
Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press joining us here at Hanging with Hennig, Josh Hennig, Alex Barardis in the 97.3 ESPN studios, at Rob Maaddi on the X platform. The whole A.J. Brown thing, I keep going back to a comment I've heard other people make, Rob, and I want to know your perspective on it. Is there's a lot of questioning out there of, the whole situation has gotten to where it is. We're now on March 28th, right? There's reporting out there that, A.J. Brown's people have put out feelers out there. The Eagles taking numerous calls. There's been numerous conversations. People have asked the question, I want to repurpose it to you. Do you think we can put the toothpaste back in the tube when we get the training camp? Or do you think it's a fait accompli that he will not be here next season?
A month ago, I thought he was not going to be here next season. But when you see things like bringing in his old college roommate, right, and I think that's a move that's made to add not just the depth in the wide receivers room, but to kind of mend those fences, to kind of make it a situation where AJ is a little bit more excited about being back in the building. If they end up going in that direction, he's not going to hold out and not play for the season. And I never got the impression that AJ. The relationship with AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts is not one that has deteriorated. There's not. He just wants the ball, and he wants to be in a system where he gets the ball and gets opportunities to get more passes and to contribute and to win. And you want guys who want to win, but you also don't want to have guys who make it all about them. If you win and a guy's got 2 catches and he's putting out cryptic messages and all of that stuff, that can all be worked out. And Josh, I think you can see AJ. Spiritual maturity is a little bit might be part of his growth. We saw some times where he put out, whether it's he's talking about a Bible verse or something that he read or something that, whatever it is. And I feel like that's a growth process that can only help him mature as a player. So as he's growing, and somebody asked him last year about, hey, what book are you reading? Remember the whole book reading thing? And he pointed out that he's diving into the Bible, and I forget the book within the Bible. Was it Jeremiah? I don't know. Whatever he was reading, but I feel like if he's got that kind of attitude and mentality, and people trying to speak into him and encourage him and uplift him, he can develop and grow more into a player that becomes more of a teammate, a great teammate. And I think that can happen. He's 27 or 28? Man, at 27 or 28, I was even more selfish than A.J. Brown. And I grew and I changed. So I can't judge him based on how he's feeling in the heat of the moment when he's not getting enough balls thrown his way and he wants to help the team win. So I do think that it can be fixed, or to put it in the terms that you said, the toothpaste can be put back in the bottle or wherever it came from, right? It can happen. People change, people grow, they develop, they get. Sometimes you need somebody to speak cold hard truth to you, whether it's a pastor, a minister, a confidant, an accountability.
Well, I think that's part
partner.
of AJ's problem. He doesn't have that. I think a lot of people have that problem, Rob. It's not just AJ Brown. We live in a world where there's a lot of people who don't have the person in their life who will speak the tough truth to them, not just the convenient truth to them.
Yeah, and you're right, because we're in an era of people being coddled and people being lifted up and being told how awesome they are, and then people being told you can think however you want to think and be whatever it is. We see a lot of crazy stuff out there, and sometimes, especially when you're someone who's got the money, the power, the fame, and the glory, the people who are surrounding him, somebody has to be courageous enough to speak truth to him. And sometimes they're afraid to be cut off, or they're afraid of how there's going to be negative repercussions. But I feel like if he finds that person, if there are enough people around, and sometimes it's got to be a teammate, it's got to be someone else, another leader, and it's clearly like that's not Jalen's MO, but somebody else within that locker room maybe could be that guy. You would hope it's a position coach, a receivers coach, or the head coach, or somebody else. But that's a good conversation. I might bring that up to a few people in Phoenix around the Eagles.
Rob, really quick before we let you go, your latest mock draft is up over at apnews.com. And what I think is interesting is not that you have a offensive lineman going to the Eagles, because, I mean, listen, we know the Eagles, they invest in the trenches. That's the Howie Roseman way, right? What I think is interesting is the why Caleb Lemieux is where he is from Utah, because you look at the way that your mock draft lays out, Rob, you have a group of guys going maybe a little higher than people might have expected. You know, Ty Simpson, you have going to the Jets at 16, for example. You know, you have Kenyon Sadiq going 19 to the Panthers. I think part of the conversation that is going to need to be had as we get closer to the draft is how the people who are drafted ahead of the 20s are going to push people down to where Philadelphia is. And unless the Eagles are going to get, nuts, to quote the Michael Keaton line from the movie Batman, unless Howie Roseman wants to get nuts, Rob, I think he's going to let the draft board and the chaos ahead of him play out and hey, you guys want to draft all those guys? That's fine. I'm going to sit here and let the best player come to me.
Yeah, and I would be more inclined to trade back than trade up and just get more assets. And it ended up in my 2.0 mock draft scenario, I think the big winners from this would be the Dallas Cowboys, because I have Jeremiah Love somehow falling to them at 12. He's a top 5 talent. I don't know that he can fall to them at 12, but the way I had it play out and the teams ahead of them, and I didn't mock any trades for this one, so I didn't want to sit there and start doing different types of deals. I might do that for mock draft 3.0, but I've got Love falling to the Cowboys at 12, and then a corner in Jermod McCoy, who I've seen a lot of mock drafts have him going top 13, top 15, and 12 to the Cowboys, falling to them at 20. So if you're a Cowboys fan, which there aren't many, well, I know there's a lot in the area, but a lot of it's certainly not well liked. Should be happy with that mock draft. But yeah, Blake Miller, a guy who some have going to the Eagles at 23. I have him going to the Steelers at 21. So it depends. There's a lot of offensive linemen. You got Caden Proctor from Alabama. He's a guy who he can go anywhere from 15 to 25, and I've got him at 17. I don't know that I'm going to stay with Ty Simpson at 16 to the Jets in 3.0, Josh. I'm thinking about that one, and I saw Dan Orlovsky say and take so much heat this week for saying he's better. He's the best quarterback in the draft class, which is kind of wild. And I didn't watch all the tape of Ty Simpson versus Mendoza like he did. And for him to say that, I think that's certainly high praise. And a lot of people are feeling that way about him. But like you said, the way the draft board shakes out early could determine, for a lot of teams, their decision to move up, their decision to stay put. And that'll be the case with Howie. The one thing we do know with the Eagles is they'll be aggressive. And if they see a guy that they love, that maybe they had top 5, but now has fallen, and they've got an opportunity to go from 23 to 18 or 16 or something like that, they'll do it if there's a guy that they absolutely love. And at the same time, they've shown that they're willing to be patient. And there was a year where the Dallas Goedert year, right? They traded out of the first round and ended up taking him in the second round. So we've seen that happen too as well. A lot of offensive linemen, I still think they come out of one in the first round, and maybe a couple in the first couple days.
He's Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press, at Rob Maaddi on the X platform, at Real Rob Maaddi on Instagram. Check out all of his coverage and his latest mock draft at apnews.com. And then don't forget about Faith on the Field, heard Saturday and Sunday mornings right here on 97.3 ESPN. And also you can get Faith on the Field wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Rob, appreciate you jumping on today. Good luck with the coaching this afternoon.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you, Josh. Take care.